Hey, how's it going, Jiu-Jitsu people, Jiu-Jitsu family? Marco Moreno here today, Saturday, September 7th, 2024. I'm very excited because I'm gonna have a cool conversation with Chadi. He's a judoka. He has an awesome YouTube channel about judo techniques, analysis, and history. Actually, he has published a book. It's this book right here. It's pretty cool. It's actually a translation from an original book from Ryohei Uchida. So Chadi has translated the book that talks about the history of judo. And you might be asking why, if we are a jiu-jitsu channel, we're talking about judo. And well, let me remind you that jiu-jitsu comes from judo. So in a way, understanding the history of judo is also knowing where Brazilian Gracie Jiu-Jitsu came from. So I'm very happy and I'm very excited. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and I hope we can learn something new today. Chadi, how's it going? Thank you for being here today. I appreciate it. It's really a pleasure to talk with you.
Hi, Marco. Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on the book. It's pretty cool.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, it was
I
a lot
guess,
of hard work. Thank you.
right? Well, the book is not your book. You're
No.
translating an original book. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yes, it's the origins and the history of judo. It's a translation of a manuscript by Uchida Ryohei from 1903. Now it's my first time translating a manuscript, so I didn't want to go with something too large. And so I found that the history chapter of his book Judo was a perfect fit. I believe in the Japanese size, it's around maybe 38 pages. So if you write 38 pages in regular, Western style pages, it's maybe half a page. So I figured it's perfect start for me. Start with something small, but it was incredibly challenging for a number of reasons. One, 1903, the Japanese that was spoken, Meiji Japanese, is not exactly like today's Japanese. So that's one challenge I had to go through, meaning if I see a word, I know, for example, a verb, but it's written weird, so you have to go back and check on websites. And like, for example, jisho.org is a great website that talks about old kanji, the kanjis that were used before today's kanji. That's another thing, the use of older kanjis. There's, for example, the quality of the print on the national library website of Japan. It's not a digital form, so it's like scanned papers, and the quality of the print itself is already very, I don't want to say bad, but not mediocre. So, for example, you have a lot of kanjis that are actually smudged, or a lot of because they're too complex and it's too small, so it gets you just get a black square basically. So you have to go by the context of the phrase, what's the kanji behind it, what's the kanji after it, and then you research, for example, the kanjis that are around it, what are some of the words that include this one, and then you start to experiment. So it was not only just reading and then writing in English, or otherwise I would be done in 2 weeks, but it was a lot of deciphering, and also there was a use of a lot of Chinese vocabulary as well being used in the old Japanese. So you have to also consult with Chinese people. Also, my Japanese teacher was guiding me throughout. Later, for the proofreading, you have the French, the English, and the modern Japanese. For example, here on the back, it's the modern translation, not what Uchida wrote. So this is for the modern audience. If you see here, it says
Oh, yes.
Gendai Goyaku, modern translation. So
Yes.
so also
Oh,
you have
okay,
to go
because
by
the second
proofreading. Yeah, it's not what Uchida wrote. No, otherwise
Ah,
I would
okay.
just like sticking papers together. No, this is actually also my modern translation. So for the modern Japanese crowd.
Yes. All right. For the viewers right now, on the second part of the book, there is the Japanese translation, which I thought. Thank you for explaining that it was the original. Uh, but this is a
Yeah.
translation to the modern Japanese. Now you're saying.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
With yeah, so I figured it would be a cool thing to do because Japanese is written from right to left, while English is
Yes.
from left to right. So if you turn it over, it's like a normal Japanese book. While if you turn it the other way, it's English or French.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's that's super cool. Chadi, tell us so a little bit about you. Probably you are in France. You're French,
Yes.
and you started training judo according to your book at the age of 27. A little late, right?
Yes.
And what you got really passionate about it, and to write this book, do you go to Japan? How do you start learning Japanese? I guess it's because you wanted to understand the art even
Yes.
more.
Yes. I started almost 3 years ago now, learning Japanese, and I went to Japan to school. I stayed there for 6 months. So I figured since I'm going to be there for a while to study and train, might as well get my black belt there. So that's what I did in 2022. So I
Oh
competed, I did the
wow,
kata, and also went to school.
that's awesome.
And I'm still actually learning Japanese because you don't just stop. And 3 years is it's not a whole lot of time. But the work was, is as I'm working it, there's also my teacher. I can always ask, I can always consult, etc., etc. And yeah, I started at 27 back in 2018, and after this was after 5 years of Aikido, and so I've been training a total of 11 or 12 years now. Total everything: Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, and Aikido.
Nice, super cool. Uh, well, thank you for writing this book. And maybe I have a question for you regarding, since we're talking about history and origins of judo.
Yeah.
The I guess the official story we got is that judo or some form of judo started in India,
Mm, mm,
went to China, and then
mm,
somehow it got to Japan, and the
mm,
Japanese developed into the what was known as Jiu-Jutsu for the samurai,
mm,
and then eventually Jigoro Kano, in a way, organized it into what he called it judo.
mhm.
Can you tell us, confirm if that's the story, or I
No.
see something wrong with that? No. All right. Tell us
Uh, At
the
first,
story of judo.
grappling arts have flourished throughout the world. You have a lot of indigenous wrestling, whether it is Central Asia, whether it is India, Europe, of course the Amazonians, you name it. There's quite a bit, and they often tend to share a lot of techniques uh, because the human body is one. I believe I talked about this in as a note, as a side note. The human body is similar everywhere. The laws of physics are the same, so it's very normal to reach same conclusions in a few places. So, but that whole thing is that idea of Chen Wanping, and did he give jujitsu to Japan from China? It's actually also debated in Mind Over Muscle. After the writings of Kano compiled, there's a foreword by Yukimitsu, I believe, and there's also this idea is also discussed there, but it's mainly the ingenuity of the Japanese people. And Ryohei Uchida was providing, if you read it closely, he was providing reference, like a timeline, basically saying that look, he was here before, and then he came back. I'm verbatim, but also he was talking about wanting to learn toride and the rod and everything. So if he was the one to actually give it to them, you would know that he wouldn't be talking like this. And also that thing with the narrative of Chinese giving it's very easy. It's because historically there's a lot of things that evolved in Japan from China. If you look at the swords, if you look, they took the kanjis or the Chinese characters, etc. So it's very natural to follow this conclusion that also the martial arts and techniques as well. And if I learned anything from doing this work, not just the book, but my channel in general, is that sometimes you can see something and it makes perfect sense and it's totally clear, but it can still be wrong. Or sometimes one evidence can jump in and it changes everything. So he talks about this. Even Kano debates it. He says that it's very, what's the word? Convenient to just talk about this particular narrative. And it sounds a bit romantic as in it appeals to your soul or emotions in a sense. And no, he was very thorough in providing a lot of reference to show that no, it's the ingenuity of the Japanese people. So, and even says that we have a lot of respect for the Chinese. That's why sometimes we say this, like I said, from cultural aspects and Chinese characters that also came into Japanese culture, etc. And but no, regarding the fighting spirit of the Japanese people is their own ingenuity.
Cool. Yes. Yeah, that was something that I read, and I was like, yeah, maybe that whole India, because yeah, you're right. I heard that in other things too, like, oh yeah, that okay, India, China, Japan. Like they always have.
Yeah, it's like you're ordering
things.
delivery. That's no.
Yeah, like the FedEx of things, but yeah, that's super cool. The Japanese figure this jujutsu, and tell me.
Wait, I need to add something. Notice a lot of martial arts or indigenous wrestling, they come to the very same conclusions. For example, the hip toss, the shoulder throw, inner reaps, etc. But what makes them a bit unique from one style to another is the cultural aspects that goes into the martial art. For example, the Japanese dress that got in and later evolved became the gi because they wanted to be sturdier. They did a double weave. Later, the rice grain, etc. Even I don't know if the jiu-jitsu gi, but do you see like a embroidered patch here on a jiu-jitsu gi or no? In judo, it exists. No. You see, like it's like a patch that's embroidered. That's actually in the
Sankis,
past. It used to be a hole to air out in their clothing, and then later they used it to grip when they fight. So that's why in judo you still have what we call the pocket grip. And then later they closed it off because Westerners were coming in, and so they made it longer. It's a whole. I made a whole presentation on the gi and how it evolved. But for example, you have the Mongols. The Mongols, they steer and sweep bigger guys, and then they shift their weight based on their herding cattle culture. For example, you have the Indians. Maybe it's more of a naked style wrestling. So it's different everywhere, based on little cultural aspects that makes the same technique different and unique, but at the same time, it's the same laws of physics are being applied. That's what I find very interesting. It's not who invented this technique, or no, you can never exactly pinpoint it, but it flourished in many places. But the cultural aspects behind a technique and how you get to a technique is what interests me.
Cool. Can you talk to us about sumo? Because apparently, according to the book, sumo is like a predecessor of all these schools of jiu-jitsu. But at the same time, when somebody talks about sumo, in my head comes the image of these two big, naked, almost naked guys with diapers pushing each other off the circle. Is that the sumo that they are talking about here in the book?
Sumo definitely evolved. It wasn't initially like this. if you look at the mythology or the founding story behind it, you see people actually killing each other and stepping on his waist and killing him. It's like he actually quotes them, and I don't. Where is it? So if you look at sumo wrestling as the predecessor of judo, he was quoting from the Kojiki. You can see that he killed him, and then he got his arm broken and he ran away. So it's like the founding story, and then later you had the fight of Taima no Kihaya, how he had his ribs broken, and he was and Nomi no Sukune broke Taima's ribs, and he stepped on his waist and killed him. So clearly, it's not the sumo of what we know now. So these are the founding stories behind it. But first, it was practiced in the royal court or in the temple on sacred ground, and then later it was. So I'm just giving a very brief way of saying it. And then, of course, the samurai were training in it. And then later, when there was peace, inner peace, in the Edo period, so the 1600s up until Meiji, it took a little bit of a side step, and then jiu-jitsu flourished. But at first, no, it was taught for the samurais, because if you look, it's very warlike in a way, because if you look at them, they just clash like this. So if you look at old armies, how they just run and clash into each other. So that's one aspect. Also, you have the open palms, because you cannot punch in armor. You're gonna hurt yourself. And also, it's very sensitive. The moment you touch, it's you're disqualified, because if you think about it, with short swords and knives and swords, if you, let's say I'm in a compromised position where I'm bending over and I have one hand on the ground, you can easily just kill me, let's say, if we're fighting. So these are little things, but it evolved in a way that the dohyo or the ring is a bit small. So to really develop technique, for example, there are techniques that are found in judo. I talked about this years ago. For example, the kakenage is like an uchimata. You have an ipponzeoi, which is the shoulder throw. You have uchigake, which is an inner reap. So they have very sophisticated techniques that are also found in judo, but you rarely see them because their space is so narrow, and their only option is to push, and push.
Yeah, you see the push than
yes.
the
So he talks
Shimai.
about this, because he says that if your only option is to push, and it's a really small space, then something else has to be developed on the side. He talks about this. And so you get to have them, but you have those throws, but they're not as developed or as refined as you would see in jiu-jitsu, because we stand up upright. We don't have the low stance. We also have a lot of space to work around. It's okay. We can throw ourselves on the ground. It's not the end of it, because we're not on the battlefield. He also talks a little bit about the battlefield. He talks about it, the shin straps, etc. You have to go to the ground and kill them, and the throw is very decisive. He talks about all of this. So sumo definitely wasn't started like we see it today, and it was a bit more fighting than to just push outside of the ring.
Right.
I don't know much about sumo story, etc., or the history in detail. You just know a little bit of regular points. It was in the temples and in front of the emperor, and then later for the samurais, and then when there was inner peace in all of Japan, later jiu-jitsu flourished, etc.
Yeah, when I teach kids classes, sometimes we put like a square with 4 belts, and we play base battle with the kids. You have to push your friend outside the square, and they are pushing and they are developing like their sense of weight, and of course you have to push, otherwise you're gonna be pushed. So you're gonna have to, in a way, defend yourself by pushing the other kid, and you're developing the base. And I'm like, oh, I think we're doing sumo right now here,
Yeah.
like, but it's very good because it's really good as a basic skill to have a good base, a good sense of balance and of balancing the other person at the same time, especially for kids, I think. Um, so sumo as a precursor of jiu-jitsu, that was very interesting in the book. And then all these schools of jiu-jitsu
Right.
spread in Japan, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I was fascinated by it's almost in the last part of the book, he's talking. And guys, just for the people who just joined, we're talking about the original book was from Ryohei Uchida, talking about the history of judo, and my friend Chadi has made a translation. So when you say about he's talking about is the original book, but he talks about the different schools of judo, right? And the stories are just fascinating, almost mythical. Some of these different judo schools, and I guess they spread out and they were all different. Can you explain a little bit about what are these different schools of jiu-jitsu in? It was no judo at the time, right? We're working on.
He first of all, it's a lot of them are based on family heritage and family name, and you have a few disciples and they can get to teach, etc. But he called them schools of judo back then, even though they were koryu jiu-jitsu. He himself argues in the chapter before it's called the various names of judo. So when he talks about jiu-jitsu, yawara, wajutsu, taijutsu, kumeuchi, tedo, etc., he says the main technique or the main purpose of those techniques is to throw and kill. And also there is arresting people and striking people, like kempo, for example, to death. And he says I think it is most convenient to use the name judo because I think he feels like it encompasses everything. So that's why he's using the name judo. We can talk about the name and how it came to be. But those schools, it really depends. Like I said, it's family heirloom. A lot of them are. There's there's sense of tradition and hereditary in them. Also, a lot of them share techniques. If you look at old books from the National Library, you can see that they shared, for example, the wrist lock or how to defend against the club, or if you're seated and then someone grabs you from behind. They tend to share a lot of these techniques, but every school, like I said, it is belonging to a particular someone. So it's basically their name and their legacy. It's not so much the technique. So, for example, let's say Gracie Baja and give me another school.
Valente Brothers.
But they both do arm bars. I'm sure, right? But everyone, they approach it differently. They have different goals. They have a different philosophy. But most of them share a lot of techniques, and some maybe focused more on competing because at the time there was competition. Maybe some focused more on the police or self-defense, but these schools differed mainly on who taught him before he founded his school, and what's his focus and what's his philosophy, and also what's his family. So a lot of these play a role. It's not just a different style or a different martial art. No, that's not the case.
Okay, but I got it. But they were also used by the samurai, because you're talking about family tradition. Art.
Yeah.
But
yes,
also this was a tool for the samurai, the hand-to-hand combat of these techniques for the battle. And then come the Meiji Restoration, I guess, and Jigoro Kano. He was tell us about Jigoro Kano. What made him organize these different schools, and what made him
Right.
create a new, I guess it's not martial art, right? What would be called a new way of preserving these jiu-jitsu techniques.
Right. I think Kano changed, or at least at the time, he changed the perception of martial arts greatly. I believe a lot of so when the Meiji Restoration, they were looking to westernize, and they were looking to maybe discard some old ways and some old traditions, jiu-jitsu was not looked upon very nicely. So that's if you look at what's his name, Tomita, when he made a speech, I think it was around 1905-ish. He made a big speech about in the past, jiu-jitsu was about if you don't have a sword, how to defend yourself, kill the guy. It took on a bad reputation, and then later with the values and the educational aspect that Kano added, because he was not only he was educated, but also he himself was very ethical. He was a very disciplined boy. And also he wanted to defend himself, so he took something that really appreciated it, because he was being bullied for his small size, and so I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with this story, and so he took it, and he did not want to keep it the way it is, like gangs against gangs or groups against groups, or to just be a troublemaker. He wanted to add the little values of it, and also being inspired by Herbert Spencer, the 3 types of education: moral, intellectual, and physical. So he said, if we can add this, we can actually change jiu-jitsu actually a lot, and hence it becomes judo, the path. And also, I was going to say something. He first started Tenjin Shinryu, and then later he had to transition into Kitoryu, because I believe his teacher died, and then he mixed the both. For example, Tenjin Shinryu had a lot of ground techniques. Actually, if you look at their books, they had the ojime, which looks like the closed guard, which is the when you make your legs like a scissor, and then apply pressure on the kidneys. You also have the arm bar, a lot of the pins that we use today. You can see the illustrations back then. And then Kitoryu was more about really movement, that fluidity, that hikidashi type of movement, the kuzushi, all this. So combine them, you get what you have like judo today.
Wow, what a great master Jigoro Kano was, and what kind of the vision of him, because without him, and because all this jiu-jitsu was viewed as old and maybe barbaric, and probably would have disappeared without Jigoro Kano, right?
I'm sure. And yes, even now, I think that's the thing. Now, when you look at judo or jiu-jitsu, you can only imagine the sport. So imagine back then you had swords, because if you read what Uchida was talking about, he was talking about swords and rods and kicking someone and killing them, and it's like it's like this what I'm practicing? You ask yourself, but you see that the worldview and the perception, it has changed dramatically, even from like now when there was competition, there was the All Japan, etc. Even back then, now with the Olympic Games and the World Tour and all these rules and the championships, even now I believe we see it way differently than what Kano did, how Kano saw it. Because if you read Mind Over Muscle, when he talks about kata, it's not what I learned about kata. You see, it's still gradually evolving, and I think now with the strength and the training science that we have, the recovery science, the nutrition, a lot of these athletes are getting so big and muscular. Some are enhanced, obviously, but I'm talking in judo specifically. They're getting tested, etc. But still, with the nutrition that we have today, with the training science that we have today, it's easier to get bigger and stronger than 100 years ago, say, or
Yeah.
right? Because back then there was a few books, a few that were genetic elite, like Sandow and all these, and Hackenschmidt. What was his name? The inventor of the hack squat. Anyways, I forget the name, but you tend to see their physiques from 1910 and 1905, and you see these great physiques that still are big today. But these people were fringe. Now with the science and with the nutrition, a lot of people can get bigger. Even I'm not saying like insane, but they can still get more muscle mass. And with the fight science and the level of competitiveness and how it's worldwide and how people are constantly competing against each other, it's completely different than what Kano in the Kano days. I'm not saying it's bad, but when you only focus on sport and how you want to collect all the medals, etc., and then when you talk about things like making a better society, you're like, what is that? How do you actually do that? That's just empty talk, right? But no, there is actually a way to do this. For example, let me give you an example. I had on my channel Catarina Costa. She's in the Portuguese team. So
Judo?
she competed, yes, she recently competed in the Paris Olympics and before the Tokyo Olympics. She's actually almost a medical doctor now. So she's already working in the hospital. She's already doing exams and she goes worldwide and competes. So she told me something that really stuck with me. She said, you know, if I have, let's say, a medal match, you know, they turn off the stadium, you go in, all the lights are only on you, and it's really scary and it's very physically exhausting. And then you get through it, you win a medal, let's say. And then 2 days later, I have a checkup, or I have a long shift at the hospital, or I have a tiny exam at school. It doesn't feel too heavy, right? Anymore. Or vice versa. If I was in the surgery room and I saw very horrendous things, then later I have a competition, I mean, it's fine, right? So imagine how much of a strong-headed doctor she will be because of this, because of her training. So when people say, how do you become a better person? First of all, the respect you show and the courtesy that you learn. A lot of us do not come from good homes, unfortunately. And you know, people can tend to have problems at home, or maybe they lose a parent, or they were raised in a bad environment. There's things that you do not choose, or do not get to choose. And for example, having an older role model and a dojo, it will completely change your life. So these are little things. Of course, there is room for competing. There was the All Japan, there was the Kohaku Shiai. Kimura was 5th degree black belt at 18. Kano, what was it? 17. I was born in 1917. Yeah, Kano was still towards the end of his life. And Kimura was competing in the Kohaku Shiai. You had also Mifune. So it's not either you compete and you're this famous athlete, or you are very philosophical and you do it only for no, it can absolutely be both. But when you focus only on viewership and how to make money and subscription and trash talking because it gets viewers and money, or and you know, non-tested competitions, then you're going the wrong way. It's not either or, like I said, but courtesy and respect, it should always be there.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because that is also the path that Jiu-Jitsu is going to.
Right.
Like, it's all about the sport. So everybody forgot self-defense. It's all about the trash talking and the steroids and the medals. And then everybody forgot about the actual values that I think Kano was very focused on judo being as an art of an educational, right?
And self-defense. He says the two goals is to defend against attacks and create a better society.
Create a better society, right? And then you go to jiu-jitsu tournaments and you're like, where when do we discuss the values? And I feel like something feels a little bit lost. Are we supposed to be a martial art, right? I mean, there are some symbols, signals of respect, the chain hands, but
basketball that's my point. Basketball players do this. Tennis, when they finish, when you watch a tennis match, they shake hands. This is just common courtesy. But I'll give you an example. Something happened at the Olympic Games. It's actually funny. Teddy Riner won I believe it was the quarterfinals against the Georgian, and he and the Georgian had a very old rivalry. And when he won, he was like, "Yeah," but he was still looking at him, and that really got into the Georgian's head, and he was pushing him, and he was yelling, and it was completely unsportsmanlike, and he was disqualified for the next round. In Jiu-Jitsu, I don't believe that. Maybe in IBJJF, but things like ADCC and trash talking is actually encouraged.
Yeah.
And getting in someone's face, and that would make headlines, and people will buy subscriptions or whatever. He got disqualified for the repêchage. So, in terms of holding some values and courtesy, judo is still doing it. But in the past, if you read a little bit about Mifune or Kano, they used to have these very long talks after class. They used to really discuss, either when Kano used to teach, he would talk a lot in the classroom. Mifune's students would, like, what was his name? Shirai, I believe. A lot of them would be a little bit nervous or even scared of him, but because they wanted to leave, and they would talk too much after class. Also, it should be a university major, I believe, Jiu-Jitsu, Judo. In Korea, there's a PhD in Taekwondo or something.
Nice.
And I do believe that they should be majored in university. Not you obviously can, but it's again more towards the sport. But there should be a doctorate about the morality. There should be always the human side being questioned, not just because I know a lot of young trainees who study physical education and they major in judo in college. But it's a sport. You might maybe write an essay here and there, talk about courtesy, but even if you major in basketball or anything, I'm sure you're going to talk about sportsmanship or whatever. But to really dive into human philosophy and making a better life through struggle, like what judo is and jiu-jitsu is, it's something completely different than basketball or swimming.
Yeah, I totally agree. And something on the book that I never read regarding a Kano quote, because also the self-defense, right? Where he says about you shouldn't practice just what interests you. If something is beneficial, practice regardless of how little interests you, because it's true, nobody wants to learn the self-defense like somebody holds your neck like this. In jiu-jitsu we have a curriculum, self-defense, and it's almost like when we want to teach it, everybody's like, we just want to spar, teach us the latest inverted guard.
Forget self-defense. How many people don't even drill properly or enough? Right?
1-2 times, let's go to spar.
Yeah, because it's fun for the young guy. He wants to spar. He has his friends, and he already picked out for the first round, the second round. A lot of people do this, but how many have done, for example, let's say 2-hour training and only technique? Defend it properly, I'm gonna try to make it work. Defend your guard, I'm gonna try to pass it. We just spend 45 minutes, I'm trying to pass your guard. Or this particular guard. How many?
Yeah, definitely not enough.
People watch instructionals, they go to sparring and they try to apply what they saw in the...
While they're sparring.
Yeah.
Yes, it happens. Speaking of the history of judo, going back to maybe the connection of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and judo, and we have to talk about Maeda. And a question I always had, Chadi, was why Maeda called it, he was a Kodokan black belt, but when he arrived to Brazil, he told the Brazilians he was teaching Jiu-Jutsu. He didn't say Judo. So that's why the Brazilians start calling it Jiu-Jutsu.
Right. It was still, as a term, it was still used. It was still the popular term to use. That's that's a simple that's a simple way of even like if you look at 1930 and 1920, like those English footage that you see from British Pate or something, they still use the term jiu-jitsu, and you can still also from the same era you see judo. It really depends, but also England is a bit different because you had Uenishi and who was it? Koizumi, which they weren't from Kodokan, but then later met Kano, Koizumi, for example. But Maeda, at the time, like early 1900s, the popular term was still, I believe, jiu-jitsu. So it wasn't like he was going against them or doing something. I'm not entirely sure what was going on administratively, but when he went with Tomita. So I don't think he was doing something out of the norm, or he was trying. It was just the popular term at the time. Tomita, when he talked in front, I think it was New York. I read it a while back, so I tend to read a lot. So sometimes if I escape a detail or a detail escapes me, I'm terribly sorry. But he talked about now it's best to call it judo, etc. That was around 1905, but still the popular term or the current term at the time was jiu-jitsu. So if you went there and said jiu-jitsu, it doesn't really mean that much. At least to me.
I see. Okay. So
and again, he went with Tomita, so he was under the guide of someone. It wasn't like he was acting only out of his own head or doing something or trying to do something. I don't believe that's the case. Or there's stuff like he wasn't allowed to teach, so he said it's jiu-jitsu. I cannot fully know. And also there is Maeda's book that was translated by Eric. But I don't think there's anything like that. I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure about this. I need to check. But from what I know, it was a very popular term to just say jiu-jitsu. To just keep it simple. Let's not try to make it too complex. But again, Maeda's thing, I have to look more into it.
Yeah, because there is also that understanding that somehow he broke with Kodokan.
No, and he wanted to teach more on the ground and stuff. No, all these things. These are again for convenience, and they're very easy to digest, and they sound fun. That he taught them a little bit, and then Helio took it, and then he created the system. It's not exactly like that. No, he was a judoka. If you look at Helio in his like those old footage, he was throwing like a judoka. He was a judoka, and also the whole thing with the ground. He competed a little bit against wrestlers, Maeda in England, and he realized he needed more newaza. But you have to understand that parallel in Japan at the time, newaza was still being developed. Newaza, it's not just. It just like happened. It just came out of the ground. That's not how it worked. It gradually evolved. Even in Brazil, the waves of Japanese going in, like Ono brothers, and then you had Omori, and then you had all these people going, and who else? Takeo Yano, etc., etc. So it was gradually that kept evolving. Even in Japan, you had Kaiichi Samura working with Isogai first when they were beating other jiu-jitsu schools, and then later you had Oda really developing it for his to win the high school Kosen, and then later he was dethroned by Kanemitsu. He also has a book called New Style of Judo, so on and so on. It's a long process that happened in Japan and also in Brazil.
Yes, because Kano, when he organized his judo, he put more emphasis on the throws, correct?
Yes.
So the newaza was not as developed, and that's when you're saying that newaza start developing with time?
It was
What
thanks to
was the reason
competition.
why Kano developed more or emphasized the standing more? Is because he was focused on the self defense.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah, he wanted people to be comfortable standing up. He wanted an upright, natural posture. He didn't want people bending over or too low. He wanted them to be swift, moving. And he didn't say don't work the ground. No, his school Tenjin Shinryu, where he comes from, it had a lot of groundwork. But yeah, at first, if you want to, let's say, even now, I want to learn how to defend myself. I just want to train. I want to be fit. I just want to learn how to defend myself. You go into jiu-jitsu, people are starting sitting down or on their knees. Then you go to judo, you see people standing up. Which is more logical to do?
Standing.
Right.
Because all the fights are standing up.
Right.
I agree.
And also, even if you're good on the ground and you look at your surrounding, a lot of the times you're going to say, maybe it's not the best decision to go to the ground.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Maybe there's a lot of people. Maybe there's a curb. You never know what's waiting for you. There's a shard of glass, whatever it may be.
That's what I do emphasize my students to. We have actually a judo class from a judo black belt that my students can go. And in the curriculum of beginners, well, we follow a little bit of the curriculum of the Helio Gracie. I'm a black belt under Helio Gracie, which is son of Helio Gracie, and his curriculum, he teaches a lot of standing.
You're a Helson student?
Black belt, I'm not directly a student, but...
So you're friends with Josh?
Josh Lover?
Simon.
Which Josh? No, I haven't heard. You know, we Helson guys, there are the Hawaiian guys of Helson, New York, Ohio, and sometimes we don't know each other.
I think Josh is from Ohio.
From Ohio?
Yeah, we've been friends for years now.
But Helson, to get a black belt under him, you had to pass the self-defense curriculum that his dad, Helio, developed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree on the standing as self-defense. And then the Wasa was later developed later on. And you say Helio was forced to, or the Gracies in general, to develop the Wasa because they couldn't take down wrestlers. Or in case of Helio, even judokas, right?
I mean... I'm a black belt. If I go to Japan now, they're gonna make me look like a white belt. I mean, it's just normal. But I think also at the time, yeah, Helio obviously was very skilled on the ground. Look at what he did with Kato. So Kato was throwing him left and right, and then he pulled him in, and then he was able to win. But also at the time, you didn't have this fixed rule like today because of, let's say, the Olympics or the IBJJF. So they didn't have the clear structure like we do today. So I talked with Pedro Valente countless times now, and also in their generation, and maybe the people who are a little bit older, they fought a bit differently. So a lot of the times they would win the fight only by the submission. The throw wasn't the ippon that we know. A lot of the times they would verbally say, let's say we've been fighting for 30 minutes, and I say, Marco, I can't go anymore. Then they declare you the winner, or I pass out, or if I tap, or I pass out, or if you threw me too hard, I pass out. So or I say I cannot go anymore. It was like this. It wasn't 2 points, ippon. These things, in many ways, did not exist. Later, time restrictions were added, and then the ippon, all for safety and also to come back the next day and train. That's basically the goal of judo, is to be really technically swift and also come back the next day and train.
Nice. Super cool, Chadi.
So when Helio, sorry, just need to add. So when Helio, for example, wants to win by the tap, it's people immediately, for example, say, because he can't throw it. But he was a judoka. He knew how to throw. Yes, the Japanese were better, but it's also it's also not wrong to say that at the time also the Ippon, like the 1920s or the early 30s, the Ippon wasn't too much like today. Even now, go
Right.
fight in Jiu-Jitsu. I throw the guys and then we continue normally. But it's just how it is in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like and also a lot of the judokas at the time, Ono, etc., they didn't care about the throw. They came from a Kosen background, like Ono brothers. They threw
Mm-hmm.
each other. They came back. They pulled, etc., etc. So they loved the ground as well. So it's a mishmash. So to say that only this is true and this is how he thought, ask yourself first: am I seeing it from my perspective, or was there something different going on at the time?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Helio says, I want to win only by the tap because he knew that they will throw him. Possible, but at the same time, he went on for rounds and rounds and rounds and showed incredible skill at the same time. So he was very competitive and skilled at the same time. So maybe he bent the rule maybe a little bit. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not in his head. Like, we can only speculate. But it's also proper to say that at the time, rules were very aléatoire, random, because we didn't have
Right.
those body of structures like we do today, the federations and the local competitions and these things.
Yeah.
And in Japan, they were clearly not. We don't. It wasn't like I can just go in and see what the Japanese are doing online and then copy the same rule set. It wasn't like that.
Right.
Information
Right.
was
Right.
very slow to reach people.
Yes. Chadi, we're getting to the end of the interview. I was gonna finish with this question for you because you
Sure.
seem on your videos that you are not happy with the way judo is
Yeah.
going, especially on the Olympics. Correct?
Right.
You said that they are kind of, in a way, um, presenting not a complete way of the way judo should go, and
Right.
there's a call for jiu-jitsu also to go on the Olympics, and I feel like judo has gone through the phases that jiu-jitsu is going, like sport, and then people wants to put it on the Olympics because I guess they want to spread to the masses, right? What would be a suggestion from you towards jiu-jitsu, in a way? How should it be spread? Would you recommend jiu-jitsu to go to the Olympics? And
Um,
also what you propose as a way of judo to go back
First,
to a judo
yeah.
that you consider is more complete.
I first starting with judo. It's I think it just I think IJF needs to put a wholesome judo, a safe and wholesome judo. So, for example, the scissors takedown, of course not. All the kinshiwaza, no.
Of course.
But to have a more complete judo, like in the past, like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if you watch the old world championships, you had a diverse expression, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think people will even love it more, and they will be happier because since the ban happened in 2010, this isn't just leg wraps. It's a lot of things. It's if you can come as an organization like the Olympics and get to dictate what judo is and how it should look like, there's a problem. And then you have the requirements, how you qualify. Only one can get to go in categories, while you watch other sports, you can have two from the same countries competing in a final, let's say a race or whatever. I think it's very tight on judo, and in many ways it's unfair for the athletes, not just for me as a spectator. I think it should just leave judo alone in terms of technique and expression, because it will never look like wrestling. It will never look like X, Y, and Z. And also, I think the World Championship draw, that's how an Olympic draw should look like. People who know about judo will definitely know what I'm talking about. Now, regarding jiu-jitsu, they should focus more on the attitude. As you said, these things like trash talk, etc., are really not needed. We're at the end, we're gonna watch a good fight. It's not WWE, and like watching Ty and Cade, it's always fun, but you don't see like they're very charismatic brothers, but they
They're
don't trash
controllers.
talk. They don't do, yeah, and they're very respectable brothers, and at the same time they're highly technical, and I love watching them. And I think, yeah, they should invest more into the like the moral aspect, the moral education of jiu-jitsu. But in terms of the Olympics, I don't feel there's any need. That it's growing in general. Even in Japan, it's becoming more popular than judo. And not, I don't know if it surpassed it or whatever. I don't look at the graphs, but but judo numbers are declining in terms of people applying for grading. The numbers of people registering, I don't know compared to jiu-jitsu, but jiu-jitsu definitely is growing worldwide. And also there's a lot of like, for example, CJI, one, they are paying the athletes very, very, very well. Judokas are not getting paid, especially not in the Olympics. Olympic athletes in general are not getting paid. It's basically for exposure. So, those companies that tell you, we will pay you in experience and exposure. That's basically the Olympics. But everything
Oh
else, you get
man.
it from sponsorship, etc. No, a lot of Olympians.
Yeah.
I was researching this, not just in martial arts, but other disciplines. Some of the best, they're on food stamps, or they get a little bit of
Oh
subsidy
no.
that's close to the minimum wage. So by the time you finish the game, that money is already spent and gone. It's really sad what happens. So
Wow.
but it's a big title. So I understand the glow and the Olympic gold, etc. I understand all of those, the emotions, but for jiu-jitsu to try to be in the Olympics, no, I don't feel there's any. The athletes are being paid. I think they should be a little bit more restrictive with the testing, and also the moral stuff. But that's it. Yeah, it's just a different expression of judo.
Nice. Awesome, Chadi. Hey, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Guys
Me
who are
too.
watching, a couple of things. Watch the YouTube channel of Chadi. It's awesome footage, awesome analysis. I love it a lot. And I always feel like, um, a lot of people likes camps. I'm the jiu-jitsu camp, I'm in the judo camp, I'm the wrestling camp. But what about being open? Judo is awesome. I like the techniques. We use it in jiu-jitsu, in our training too. So go and check out Chadi's YouTube channel, and also check out this book, The Origins and History of Jiu-Jitsu, of Judo, pardon, sorry, that Chadi has translated, and it's cool to know the history. Thank you so much, Chadi. Any final words you
Thank
want
you,
to say
Marco.
to maybe a
No,
practitioner of
uh,
judo or jiu-jitsu? How can he use the art for becoming a better person? What they should focus on? If you want to finish with some final words of wisdom.
first of all, thank you, Marco. Focus, always focus on what a particular thing can teach you. Always focus on growing, not just in technique, but for example, when you're fighting, a lot, and as a beginner, you panic easily, etc., and then later on, you become slowly more adjusted, not just posture, but also mentally. Try to apply that outside of the mats, and it doesn't get easier; you only get better. So that's very important, and just keep working on yourself, and eventually you'll see yourself transforming.
Awesome. Thank you, Chadi. Hope to see you
Thank you,
soon.
Marco.
Take
See you
care.
soon, man. Bye.